Psalm 1, the Blessed Man. It is immensely difficult to translate this material from one long established context into a new empirical psychological context. I think the task is of the same magnitude as translating the symbolism of alchemy into psychological experience and understanding. Jung wrote 4 major volumes in his effort to do that: Psychology and Alchemy, Alchemical Studies, Mysterium Communicationis, and the Psychology of the Transference. The sum total of that work was to bring back into collective awareness a vast amount of symbolic material which had been lost to modern understanding. Now, it's not precisely the same situation with the Psalms, but there is a certain similarity. The biblical material, which has served as the basis for the traditional Western religious standpoint, has lost its relevance for a significant percentage of modern people. Something of the same situation as the alchemical material, and it's no easy task to make the shift. What makes it doubly difficult is that the translation from the traditional context to a new psychological one can be understood and assimilated only if the reader brings to the effort a certain personal experience with the depths of the unconscious. If there is no such experience, it will be very difficult to understand the move from one realm to the other. Nevertheless, I'm going to make an initial effort to translate these 15 Psalms into empirical psychological understanding. I don't feel I do a very good job. It's very hit or miss, and some Psalms receive more attention than others. My method is to treat them as though they were dreams. I don't know any other way to do it, so let's read the first dream. 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. 2. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. 3. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in the season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. 4. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. 5. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. 6. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. I think it never fails when I'm first presented with a dream. My reaction is, oh my God, I haven't the faintest notion what that means. So you go to work and you start with one image at a time. Then, if grace helps you out, some meaning starts to emerge. The first word of the first verse of the book of Psalms is beatus, blessed, and the whole psalm describes the state of the blessed man. Now, what does it mean psychologically to be blessed? If one follows up the different etymologies, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and the usage in various places, what seems to emerge is that blessedness in the context of the Psalms is the goal of human existence and refers to being in a state of favor before God. While that's certainly understandable psychologically, blessedness would be the state of the ego when it's consciously and appropriately related to the self. Some modern translations use the word happy, but I don't believe blessedness is synonymous with happiness. Rather, I think it refers to being centered in one's wholeness, which includes the opposites. One commenter said that the blessed man was that one among 1,000 who lives for the accomplishment of the end for which God created him. This, I think, would fit with the psychological implications of the term. Taken as a whole, the psalm contrasts 2 ways of being: the way of the righteous, which leads to the blessedness, and the way of the wicked or the ungodly. The 2 Hebrew terms are tzaddik, righteous or wise, and rasha, wicked. Unfortunately, the word righteous has rather ambiguous connotations nowadays. Who among us does not think of self-righteous as soon as the word righteous comes up? But in its original sense, it means the straight, right way. Psychologically, we can think of the way of the righteous, tzaddik, as self-oriented, whereas the way of the wicked, rasha, as antagonistic to the self. The text tells us that for the righteous his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. So the chief characteristic of the blessed man is that he strives to be obedient to the inner law. This then brings up a major symbolic image, not only for the Psalms but for the whole Hebrew Bible, the law. The blessed man constantly relates to it, and this gives major importance to what is symbolized by the law. The Hebrew word for law is Torah. Its etymology is very interesting. I dig this all up out of the Old Testament word books and things like that, but it's not dead dusty work because a living meaning emerges from following up these trails, and I can tell it's alive by the effect it has on me. Libido is released. Torah, everybody's heard that word, a very important term for the Jew. It derives from a verb yara, meaning to throw, cast, direct, teach, instruct. The basic image behind this, as the books tell me, is to throw out a hand and finger and point the right direction to go. Which way is it to Boston? You throw out your hand and point the way. That's the image and experience at the root of the word Torah. Now, one of the things that concerns me as I try to convey to you the material I've uncovered is that I'll tangle you up in too many different lines of thought simultaneously. You are all familiar with that phenomenon if you have dipped into Jung's Mysterium Conjunctionis. You don't have to go very far before feeling confused, lost. I constantly run the risk of doing the same thing with this material. On the other hand, if I don't take that risk, you won't have an opportunity to observe my psychological methods. So here's another of these beautiful Jewish legends. This comes from the Talmud, and it talks about the Torah. For the believing Jew, especially the ancient Jew, Torah had a very clear-cut meaning. It wasn't this symbolic image that I'm talking about. It was, first of all, the Ten Commandments, the literal law that God communicated to Moses. Secondly, it was the 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch. So they thought they knew what they were talking about when they talked about the law. However, in the realm of the legends, things get more complicated. The psyche comes into the picture and the stories become richer and more psychological. This legend in the Talmud conveys a sense of how precious the Torah was to the pious Jew. Yahweh has just presented it to Moses on Mount Sinai, but it has been lost. They cannot find it. In the hour when Moses descended from before the Holy One, blessed be he, Satan came and said before him, Master of the world, the Torah, where is she? Notice the feminine personification. He said to him, I gave her to the earth. Satan went to the earth and said to her, The Torah, where is she? She said to him, God understandeth her way, and he knoweth her place. Thereupon he went to the sea, but the sea said to him, She is not with me. He went to the deep, but the deep said to him, She is not in me, as it is written. The deep saith, She is not in me, and the sea saith, She is not with me. Perdition and death say, We have heard a rumor thereof with our ears. Satan returned and said before the Holy One, Blessed be he. Master of the world, I searched in the whole earth and found her not. He said to him, Go to the son of Amram. He went to Moses and said to him, The Torah which the Holy One, blessed be he, gave you, where is she? He said to him, Who am I that the Holy One, blessed be he, should give me the Torah? The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, Moses, are you a liar? He said before him, Master of the world, you have hidden a treasure in which you delight every day. Can I claim this benefit for myself? The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, Since you have belittled yourself, she will be called by your name, as it is written. Remember the Torah of Moses, my servant. While that's a legend about Satan looking for the Torah and Moses not daring to acknowledge he had it, I think it's evident that in the legend more is implied by the term Torah than just a set of commandments. It is a much richer, mysterious, and more complex entity than that. Now I'm following a line here, I hope I don't lose you. This legend quotes several verses from Job 28. If one is going to do a full dream interpretation, one has to follow up all these threads, so we go to the passages in Job that the legend refers to. There is a path which no fowl knoweth, and which the vulture's eye hath not seen. But where shall wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is it found in the land of the living. The depth saith, it is not in me, and the sea saith, it is not with me. It cannot be gotten for gold, neither shall silver be weighed for the price thereof. Destruction and death say, we have heard the fame thereof with our ears. God understandeth the way thereof, and he knoweth the place thereof. This reference is to wisdom, that feminine helpmate who was with Yahweh when he created the world. In Latin she was called Sapientia Dei, the wisdom of God, in Greek Sophia. And the Talmud's reference to this passage in relation to the lost Torah establishes the symbolic equation. Torah equals wisdom. We might have guessed that because the word Torah, like wisdom, is feminine. The Job passage also connects the Torah with the image of the path or the way. It speaks about wisdom as the path which no fowl knoweth, and which the vulture eye hath not seen. So by this line of associations we arrive at the idea that the Torah is a path, just as we did by the etymology that spoke about throwing out the hand and pointing a direction with the finger, and a direction implies a path. I must go a little bit further, hoping I haven't lost you entirely. In Mysterium Conjunctionis, Jung discusses an alchemical text, which uses this same passage from Job to describe the philosopher's stone. Therefore, it says, Job 28:7, the bird hath not known the path, neither hath the eye of the vulture beheld it, for this stone belongeth only to the proven and elect of God. So a biblical quotation referring to the path of wisdom or the law of God, the Torah, is grafted onto the alchemical image of the philosopher's stone. As Jung has demonstrated, the alchemists didn't know what they were doing. In other words, the unconscious lived through them. Therefore, it's the unconscious that makes the connection between the path, which the vulture has not seen, and the philosopher's stone. But from this sequence of associations, we end up with a symbolic equation that Torah equals the philosopher's stone. We've traveled through the centuries and through a whole series of interrelated symbolic materials to locate that connection. But this is the way we have to go, because this is how the collective psyche manifests itself. We are not dealing with theories or abstract constructions. We are trying to trace the reality of the collective psyche as these various images unfold through the centuries and as they move from one symbolic tradition to the other. The image of the path or the way appears in other major religious traditions as well. I chose the one leading to alchemy, but we also know that Christ identified himself with the way when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And in Chinese wisdom, especially Taoism, the archetype of the way is expressed in the central concept of Tao. These are all amplifications of the archetypal image that lies at the root of Torah, the law of the Lord, that the blessed man delights and meditates on day and night. If it is such an important archetypal image, it will show up in modern material, and of course it does. It comes up in modern dreams as images of roads, paths, stepping stones, indications of a pathway or a direction or some way of guidance, a way to go that the ego doesn't know about, that has a non-ego quality to it. When one has lost the way psychologically and doesn't know what to do, it is very moving indeed to receive a dream that reveals that there is a way, that there is an inner direction, a path. For that person, a hand is thrown out and a finger points the way. I remember a young man who was lost. He had nothing pointing the way, neither vocationally nor in a more general sense. The Torah was lost, and he didn't know how to be righteous in the original sense. One day he came with a dream. He was in a garden that seemed to be randomly planted. It had no structure. But as he looked closely, he saw stones, multicolored stones, embedded in that garden. Then it dawned on him. Those are stepping stones. In other words, there was a path. I knew it at once. You can tell when the shivers go up and down your spine. You know at once that something central has been struck. He didn't know it at once, but he found his way. He went on to become a psychiatrist. So the Blessed One, the so-called Righteous One, is the one who delights in the law, in the way, and who meditates on it day and night. Then the psalm offers another analogy. We're told in verse 3 that such a Blessed One shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. As I've said, I can only deal with this text in the same way I would deal with a dream. If a person brought me a dream like this, I'd say, that reminds me of Jung's dream, and I'd look it up in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Here's what I'd find. Soon afterward, in the spring and early summer of 1914, I had a thrice repeated dream that in the middle of summer an Arctic cold wave descended and froze the land to ice. In the third dream, frightful cold had again descended from out of the cosmos. This dream, however, had an unexpected end. There stood a leaf-bearing tree, but without fruit, my tree of life, I thought, whose leaves had been transformed by the effects of the frost into sweet grapes, full of healing juices. I plucked the grapes and gave them to a large, waiting crowd. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that dream connects Jung with the blessed man, whose delight is the law of the Lord. I don't need any more connection with that, but that's just one association. There are a great many other. The archetype of the tree is exceedingly rich in symbolic associations. Jung has a lengthy essay in which he summarizes the commonmost associations pertaining to a tree. Growth, life, unfolding of form in a physical and spiritual sense, development, growth from below upwards and from above downwards, the maternal aspect, protection, shade, shelter, nourishing, fruits, source of life, solidarity, permanence, firm rootedness, but also being rooted to the spot, old age, personality, and finally death and rebirth. To this list we might also add the images of a world center, a world axis, a connection between above and below, the self in profile as a developmental process. All these associations can be applied to the psalmist's image of the tree of the blessed man. The fact that the tree is planted by rivers of water calls to mind the two trees in the Garden of Eden. This association would suggest that the righteous man has regained a connection with the lost paradise through his contact with the superpersonal center of the self. In the apocryphal book of Ecclesiasticus, wisdom describes herself as many kinds of trees and, especially pertinent to this image, as a tree planted by the water. I was exalted like a cedar in Libanus, and grew up as a plane tree by the water. Then we hear of other trees too. There's the world tree, Yggdrasil of Norse mythology, and a great inverted cosmic tree in the Upanishads. There is that ancient tree whose roots grow upward and whose branches grow downward. That indeed is called the right, that is called Brahman. That alone is called the immortal. All worlds are contained in it, and no one goes beyond. And again in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a fig tree in ancient story, the giant Ashvata, the everlasting, rooted in heaven, its branches earthward. Each of its leaves is a song of the Vedas, and he who knows it knows all the Vedas. The Sephirotic tree of the Kabbalists is also pictured as an inverted tree. In contrast, the philosophical tree of the alchemists, which symbolizes the alchemical process of transformation, grows from below upward. All these associations are relevant to this particular image of the tree planted by the rivers of water. So we can make the symbolic equations that this tree is the tree of Jung's dream, the tree of Yggdrasil, the tree of the Upanishads, of the Bhagavad Gita, and the Kabbalistic tree of the Sephiroth. All three growing from above and downward, from the transpersonal dimension down to the personal dimension. It is the philosophical tree of the alchemists, wisdom's tree and the tree of life with the 4 rivers flowing from it. It's all of those things. Now, if one is doing with this psalm what the righteous man is supposed to be doing, his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. All these images would be the content of the meditations. Meditation is the tree too, you see. I'm trying to give you some sense of what those meditations would be, but I have to be careful. If you go too deep, everything becomes everything else and you lose your bearings. Meaning walleth over. There is such a thing as too much meaning and not enough earthly standpoint. But this isn't the end of the psalm. After talking about the nature of the blessed man, the righteous one, the psalmist goes on to say, "The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff, which the wind driveth away." So we've got something opposed to this tree, and the blessed man, in contrast to the righteous, we have what's called the wicked or the ungodly, described as chaff, empty husks without central substance. As a self-oriented one is fruitful, substantial, nourishing, so the self-alienated one is empty, trivial, weightless. Augustine's interpretation of this particular phrase is the chaff which the wind driveth away refers to pride, in that it puffeth him up. According to another commenter, quote by Spurgeon, wind means whirlwind and shows the vehement tempest of death which sweeps away the soul of the ungodly. Of course, no sooner is the word whirlwind used than we think of Job 38:1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Etymology is very helpful as we try to understand what is translated as wicked. The Hebrew word is rasha. One way of approaching the meanings of these Hebrew words is to see how they were translated into Greek in the 3rd century BC. This gives us some idea of the usage of that time, which we can't know. But those Greek translations of the 3rd BC could. They were there. In the early Greek translation, the Septuagint, we find the word rasha translated into Greek in 3 different ways: godless or impious, sinful, and lawless. They are not exactly the same, but the underlying meaning seems to be lack of awareness of the deity. I think that what we have here is not a moral judgment, but rather an objective description of 2 psychological states. In other words, the human race isn't divided into 2 categories, one representing the righteous and the other the wicked. That is too concrete a projection. Rather, these 2 categories represent 2 psychological states of being, each experienced by one individual at different times. There will be certain occasions where one can experience what is called by that ambiguous word righteousness, and there will be other times when one psychological state will feel more like the chaff that the wind driveth away. No individual is permanently and perfectly in relation to the self. That doesn't exist. Verse 5 then tells us that these 2 conditions will be separated out at the judgment. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. This passage is considered to refer to the last judgment, the eschatological and decisive encounter, in psychological terms, with the activity itself. But the term congregation of the righteous is something different. It's a fascinating image. Psychologically, it might correspond to what Jung calls the ecclesia spiritualis. I am well aware that I am open to the criticism of defining one unknown with another. So just what is the ecclesia spiritualis? Jung speaks of it in Mysterium Coniunctionis. He doesn't say what it is, but the materials he presents that speak of it give the same indication of what is meant by the term. It is a spiritual church, as opposed to a concrete congregation, an invisible grouping of individuals scattered in both time and space, who have had the same deep experience of the autonomous spirit. Finally comes the statement, "For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. I understand this to be an allusion to the mutual and reciprocal process of knowing and being known that operates between the ego and the self. This last verse of Psalm 1, "For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish," says in effect that being known or seen by the self means to live, but not being known is to perish. In one biblical passage, Jesus says to the sinners, "I never knew you." The ungodly who do not know God in turn are not known by Him. In other words, there is a reciprocal quality to the relationship. Without a conscious connection with the self, which brings about that reciprocal knowing and being known, the ego cannot survive. Thus, one definition for existence might be that the basis for life is being known by and knowing God, or in psychological terms, seeing and being seen by the self.